So I sat down and read a checklist of things I expected to happen or wanted to see happen in the movie, and it sort of ended up turning into an outline. In other words, I think I unintentionally kinda wrote fan fiction. So I'm probably totally off about all of this, but if I'm right about any of it, I can point at this video and, I guess, feel really smart. And if I completely miss the mark in every single way, we can just never talk about this video again. Sound good? Let's get started. First of all, my idea for where the movie goes very much revolves around where I feel the 7th season was leading, which was a big crazy showdown with the Peril Partnership. With that said, let's jump in. Early on, we get a scene with Hank actually being successful as a vigilante. Maybe he scares off some muggers Batman style. Soon after, the Peril Partnership shows up and tells Hank they've been watching him and they ask him to join them. Hank has no idea they're evil and agrees without hesitation. Hank style. Cut to Dr. Venture, Pete, and Billy putting the finishing touches on the latest Ventec invention, a time machine. For the record, this is a time machine that doesn't actually move, but rather lets the time traveler jump between time machines that have already existed at different points in time. Meanwhile, Dean is looking for Hank. Dean meets with Dr. Orpheus, who looks for Hank psychically and feels his presence somewhere in upstate New York. Back to the Peril Partnership, we learn that they've been monitoring the Venture family and have a plan to steal Dr. Venture's time machine from him by turning Hank against his family. They knew about Dean and Serena hooking up, and Scare Bear bringing Hank to Dean's dorm room was totally them. Quick side note, I have never given a crap about Scare Bear or Scare Bear theories, but this just kind of popped in my head as I was writing this out, and it works pretty well. So anyway, they reminded him of what Dean did, how shitty of a dad Dr. Venture could be, and how Brock abandoned him, and it works. The Peril Partnership turns Hank against his family. Back with Dr. Venture, the Monarch shows up to confront Dr. Venture, who escapes with Billy and the time machine. Somewhere in there, Dr. Venture severs his finger. Throughout the movie, we get a bunch of scenes with Dr. Venture and Billy traveling through time, including a bunch of silly scenes like revisiting Escape to the House of Mummies, and they have to visit the Titanic, but also some super important moments. They travel to the future and observe future Dr. Venture and a future crownless monarch being friendly. Future Dr. Venture calls the monarch Malcolm. They travel back to that scene in the forecast manufacturer in which Dr. Venture calls the monarch Malcolm. They travel back in time and find out how the monarch and Dr. Venture are blood related, if they're clones or brothers or cousins or something else. Whatever they discover, it's awful and the reason why the monarch hates Dr. Venture. Dr. Venture genuinely feels bad. Meanwhile, Dean's been on his journey to find Hank, and it leads him to an apartment in upstate New York where he meets a slightly older, slightly doughier, regular guy, Hank. Dean learns that this is the actual original Hank raised along with the original Dean by their mother. Dean is envious of the simple life they've gotten to live and of which he feels deprived. Later in the movie, original Hank brings Dean to meet his mother. Eventually, we find out that his father gave full custody of the original Hank and Dean to their mother, but was left feeling kind of empty and sad on the compound without them, so he grabbed some DNA and created clones to raise as his own. This new information gives Dean the perspective he needs to appreciate his family and the incredible life he's had. Just then, the Peril Partnership shows up in a giant airship so that Hank can arch his brother. Around the same time, back at Ventec Tower, Dr. Venture arrives back in the present where the Monarch is still waiting to confront him, idling the time with Pete White in 21. We get this really cool cross-cutting of Dr. Venture apologizing to the Monarch while Dean apologizes to Hank. Some sentimental stuff about family and crappy dads. Surprising no one, Hank forgives Dean. Surprising everyone, the Monarch drops to his knees and accepts Dr. Venture's apology. Years and years of burning hatred, all extinguished in an instant by a simple, genuine apology. With their plan to use Hank to steal the time machine out the window, the Peril Partnership decides to just kidnap Hank and Dean and barter their lives for the time machine. The Peril Partnership airship arrives in New York City, and we get a totally awesome climax with the OSI, the Guild, the Crusaders Action League, Brown Widow, Hell Throw in the Triad versus the Peril Partnership. In the aftermath of the battle, the Peril Partnership is defeated, and Wariana asks Brock to marry him. Denouement, Brock and Wariana's wedding reception packed with every character ever in the background. Dr. Venture gives a best man speech that's a slightly meta thank you to the fans, intercut with silent scenes of characters we didn't have time for, like Triana graduating from magic school, Dermot ranking up in the OSI, Brickfrog throwing bricks, what have you. Credits. Post-credits, we're still at the wedding, it's winding down, ties are loosened, shirts are partially unbuttoned, anyone who could possibly be called a Venture brother is lounging around, including the Monarch who says he thinks he's going to retire, removes his crown, and tells Dr. Venture to call him Malcolm. The end. If you really hate the idea of Brock and Wariana getting married, sub them out for Shore Leave and Al, but I think Brock getting married is a nice kind of period on a character who famously fucks a lot. Same goes for the Monarch. His whole character is built around hating Dr. Venture, so having him forgive Dr. Venture feels like a finale sort of thing to do. And also we get a little endpoint on Dean's actively trying to reject the super science life for years by finally embracing it. Other half-baked ideas I've had? I've always thought it would be awesome if a season, or now the movie I guess, starts off with the older original Hank and Dean just kind of living mundane lives, making the audience think that some crazy time jump has occurred. We could even get a new intro with the older Hank and Dean just kind of walking around doing normal stuff before ultimately revealing the twist they're the original Hank and Dean and this is just the present day. The OSI realizes that they have no magic guys while the guild is lousy with them, so they invite the Triad to act as consultants or something, which keeps the Triad around on the show. There's a bunch of scenes with the guild and the OSI teaming up and readying for a showdown with the Peril Partnership incorporating Brock, Shore Leave Hunter, Dr. Mrs. the Monarch, etc. Hatred dies heroically in the final battle. He kinda doesn't have a purpose anymore, and I love the guy, so give him a hero's death. Let him die as a soldier at war. Maybe the leader of the Peril Partnership is Tiger Shark, that guy from Any Which Way But Zeus. The Revenge Society and Sphinx had their top-level guys in attendance, so maybe the Peril Partnership did too. So it turns out he was content doing his thing, staying out of guild business, until Brock cuckolded him and completely embarrassed him in front of everybody. So like everything is kinda Brock's fault, which would tie in nicely with him getting married and not fucking everybody he meets. So yeah, the Venture Brothers finale movie will probably be completely different in every single way, but this was fun to make up, so thanks for indulging me. See you next week for a video about the Ventureverse timeline. Go Team Venture.